Bo Mattsson, previously founder of Sentinel, J12, and Hubert. The rains have finally stopped, and the sun is shining here in Portugal.
Nice.
I both I feel that literally, and I feel it figuratively. There's a lot of good stuff going on in my world.
Very good, very good. So you both got rain and sun. Sounds like the perfect recipe for a good harvest then in the fall.
I hope so. I hope so. We also had like a sort of hurricane here a couple weeks ago that downed a lot of trees. So I'm hoping the harvest comes without any fires to burn the wood. It was intense.
Right. Oh, yeah, I bet.
How are you in this moment?
A little bit hurried. I hurried back from a lunch that went overboard time-wise, unfortunately. But apart from
Because
that,
it was going so well, or because you weren't?
I'm an ignorant bastard, and I pay the price for being such.
Go on.
Well, by not checking what the time was.
Yeah.
Eventually, my friend got up and, or my company got up and said, "Oh, it's 1:45. I need to go." And I said, "Fuck." But I have a very pink, very stand-outish lady bicycle that brought me home in no time at all.
I love it.
So here I am.
I hear that's the way of the world in Stockholm. Everybody gets around by bike.
Yeah.
That's
And
how you know a country has its priorities right.
yeah, and it's way faster than anything else.
I love it.
And also, I mean, I've always been a great fan of not getting rid of everyday motion.
Yeah.
I remember when we had a house, I used to mow the lawn by a hand-driven thing, you know, like they had in the 50s and the 60s. And we had a new neighbor coming in, and he just stood and looked at me and said, "What the fuck are you?" And I said, "Well, I've come to the conclusion that it's better that I do this than buying myself a very expensive thing to automatically fix my lawn, and then I pay like $1,000 a year to go to the gym." And he said, "Oh, you actually got a point there."
The built-in gym.
And he bought himself a similar one.
All right. You're an evangelist.
In that very small respect, I managed to actually evangelize him into the physical movement.
You mentioned something similar when we first spoke about cutting timber. I imagine that's in the same vein.
Yeah, apart from the fact that I sell that.
So there's added benefit.
Still just a hobby, but I love doing it, and it's well, yeah, you need to move around. I mean, we typically sit, I don't know, 60-70% every day. We sit down.
Yeah, it's not how we evolved, is it?
No, and I guess we're not supposed to be like this. So it's and now they are busy creating robots to remove even the tiniest small fraction that is left of natural movement, such as taking out the dishwasher or hanging clothes, etc., etc.
One step away from the matrix.
One step away from the matrix. Yeah. So we are. It's almost as self-defeating and self-defecating, I was on the verge of saying, as what Trump is doing to the US.
Yeah.
What we are doing to our bodies.
It's true, right? And it's like in the name of efficiency, but in the way that you paint it, it's like efficiency in what direction? We're going in the opposite. We're going very efficiently in the opposite direction of where we should be.
Exactly.
You want to be in better shape? Go in this direction. See how you can, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. And depression, everything is taking hold, and people have way too much time. They spend way too much thinking about who am I, where am I heading, where is the world, what is the world going to, and the more we think, the crazier we get. You should keep. I have a very good friend that has 5 children, and that's a shed load of children. And he has had this saying since child number 3 that children either need to be in movement, at the table eating, or in the bed sleeping. And that is so true. That kind of encapsulates a very good philosophy overall. You need to be doing things instead of thinking things.
Yeah. There's a number of points I want to pull on that. I was one of 5 children, and I think that I still am, as
Yeah.
it were.
That's good.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think that's a fairly accurate representation of much of our childhood. We had
Yeah.
a lot of meals together at the table, and there was a lot of moving between the meals.
Yep.
Maybe not as much sleeping as we could have used in high school. It reminds me of a funny experience I had once. I was in India on a 2-week meditation retreat,
Yep.
and it was in a really remote part of India. At one point, we took a silent walk through the forest, and there were a bunch of monkeys that were up in the trees where we walked through.
Yep.
Um, and for some reason, I'm fascinated by monkeys. So I went back a little bit later that day, and I saw that as I approached, the monkeys all fled to the trees, fled behind the trees, and they wanted to see if I was safe. Um, I stayed relatively still, just sat and watched them. After a few minutes, they saw that I was not a threat and sort of forgot about me. And it was so interesting to me to see that when they felt safe, what were they doing? And if I remember, it was one of 3 things. They were either resting, sort of caressing each other, and um, what's it called? Grooming each other,
Yeah. Yeah.
resting and caressing, um, or running around chasing each other, playing, etc., or fornicating.
Yeah.
Those were the
the 3.
those were the 3. I imagine they slept at some point as well.
It used to be like I remember my let's see, what was he to me? He was probably my great father's younger brother. I mean, he was old enough to have lived without electricity. And I mean, I'm from in the woods in Sweden, so I guess electricity came very late to that part of Sweden. But he told me that it was not uncommon in the winter time that people went to bed at like 6:30 p.m. I mean, it was pitch dark by that time, and light was extremely expensive. So the thing you did, you went to bed. But the thing is that they typically were awake 2 to 3 hours in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And that was typically the time when the family they all slept more or less in the same room. They discussed what had happened during the day, what was going to happen the next day, and a big issue in their lives, and pitched in and participated in this. But they also did another thing. They made babies, the
Yep.
adults. Yes.
Yeah.
That was the time when that happened. And then they fell asleep again at like 2 a.m. and then they slept until the sun rose.
That's why there are so many children back in the day.
Probably. Electricity kills a lot.
It does. It does. I'm remembering it now. There's a French word, dorveille, for that in between wake time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I guess from dor, which is sleep, and veille, which is wake, the sleep wake.
Okay.
Uh,
Nice.
so I'm curious with this philosophy because I think I align with it a lot. My guess is though, and tell me where this is right and where this is wrong. There's a certain kind of thinking of like sitting, focused thinking that you're probably a fan of, and then a certain kind that's sort of rumination. It's not only unproductive; it's sort of anxiety inducing. Am I reading you right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not at all against thinking as such, of course not. But there is a part of thinking where you kind of question yourself that I think lead to just disaster.
Yeah, the middle of the night rumination where anything else that you could be doing would be more helpful than what you're doing.
And especially in these times when the comparison to your peers is just a click away. I mean, I thought it was tough enough when you were like in 7th, 8th grade in the 70s that you had to compare yourself to the guy sitting next to you.
Yeah. So, question for you as an executive. I'm not getting the impression that you struggle with this. One of the struggles that many of my clients deal with is they make themselves so busy. They don't make time to think. They don't make time to focus, to zoom out and focus on the highest level, the most important questions. Uh, how do you make time for that?
I don't think I consciously make time for that. I like to debate things. So I guess I get into that kind of thinking mood just by debating. So if I find someone that just so happens to take an opposite stand or opinion that I happen to have, it's the greatest gift of them all.
Yeah. So you're using your conversations with those people as the opportunity to evolve, flesh out, challenge your own thinking,
Yeah.
thinking together.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter whether it's a micro thing regarding my own company or if it's a macro thing. It's still always interesting to hear different opinions and try to argue them down. And from time to time you lose out for the dog. From time to time, Snaps. The name of one of the dogs is Snaps, which is Snaps in Swedish. But, the other one is the word for half the schnapps. Nubbe.
Very good. I see the theme.
So I guess the debate in itself kind of refreshes your mind and keeps you busy trying to understand your arguments and why you're doing what you're doing and trying to, and it also allows you, I guess, to zoom out and see things from a different perspective. But I've never, ever consciously put myself to the side with the decision to do some thinking. No, that has never happened.
Wow. That's just woven organically through your work.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah.
I used to be, I think when I was 15, 16 years old, I wanted to be one of, these very literary, black-clad young males that wander the world philosophizing around this and that. That did not give me much of what I longed the most for, meaning girls. So I quit doing that, turning 16. And I kind of promised me at that time, given the success that I started to have with the women around me, that I was never ever going to find myself in a position as that, being one of these black rockers. That was not a good place to be. They spend a shed load of time thinking and reading 19th century German philosophers.
Does philosophy still play a role in your world, or did you leave that behind at 16 as well?
I think it's I mean the entire being of being a human, I guess, is extremely interesting, and philosophy is obviously a very fascinating subject in that. So, and luckily I have some in my closest friendship that are still pulling me in that direction. So, but that also always end up in a conversation and almost a debate around some things in life. So it's still kind of a debate thing rather than a thought thing, if you get my
notion. You know what I appreciate about that is our lives are deeply relational. And so the fact of engaging in philosophy relationally keeps that front and center, makes it impossible in some ways, or harder anyway, to forget, to sideline, to come up with some kind of philosophy that's divorced from relationality.
Yeah. And I've always tried to be a decent person. But decent does not mean kind.
Go on.
Well, kindness is something that has a timeline attached to it. So I could do two things to a small child. I could either fulfill his short-term wishes and get an instantaneous gratification myself for being kind, because evidently, as can be seen on the child's face, I was kind, right? But if I, over a 10-year period, have supplanted his own God-given teeth by plastic, I evidently was not kind. I was actually torturing the child.
Right.
So that's what I mean when I say that I strive to be a decent person. I need to be kind, but on a long-term basis. Which means that from time to time, you are probably very rough in the short term.
Yeah.
And I think the entire world, especially the Western hemisphere, has gone totally wild when it comes to be gracious and kind with a very, very short-term time span.
Yeah. You have a much longer time span in your mind.
You should have. But it's the instant gratification you get by being nice in the short term is very tempting.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And it takes a certain strength to resist the pull to that instant gratification in service of the longer term purpose.
Yep.
I'm curious, maybe I'll use that as a segue. however organic or not. It took you and your team at Hubert several years to really find traction. You had success as an entrepreneur before that. You came into this new endeavor and you didn't find the fit right away. There are a few questions I want to ask you about this, but what was it that in that moment, in the short term, not there yet experiences, what was it that kept you going and searching for what you ultimately found was a great fit?
It's a very question to answer, because part is curiosity. Can we actually do this? Is it possible? Are we smart enough, or are we good enough to actually be able to build a model that can predict human behavior? So part of that was just the curiosity of trying to see if we can find it. But to a large extent, it's also that every single one of us is a prisoner of our own surroundings. So if you have put together a team of 5, 6, 7 individuals, it's not that easy to break it up, even though you don't think it actually doesn't work.
So there's a certain momentum that you had generated that kept you going for a little while.
Absolutely. It's like ice skating. You do 4 or 5 strokes and then you continue to go for another 100 meters or whatever. So I think the simple answer is that it's a combination of actually trying to find a way to succeed, which is basically, I guess, curiosity. Because that is the main driver behind. I mean, people call it grit or whatever, but actually it kind of boils down to curiosity. Without curiosity, grit would not exist, I would guess. Unless you're severely stupid. In that case, I guess grit could exist without curiosity. But for the average person, I guess it's the main driver of staying on the course is curiosity. But then, to a very large extent, I think it's actually you're a prisoner of whatever you have created, at least for some time being.
Yeah. There's an old quote I like along those lines: it says, "We shape our environments and then they shape us."
Absolutely. Absolutely. So true.
Yeah. And you told me a little bit before, but tell us now the story. When you started Hubert, it was something else entirely. What was it, and how did you get to what it is now?
Leaving Sint, one of the biggest problems that we had at Sint, because I mean what we did at Sint was we ran a marketplace between market researchers on the buy side and potential candidates to fill out surveys on the sell side. And on the sell side was typically represented by 4,000 or 5,000 partners that had a huge web traffic. So they built their kind of registers within the overall register that we upheld. And one of the absolute simplest way to kill off a respondent was any of the large market research firms doing a survey, because typically their survey tools were so bad, or they were so badly programmed, as the word for it is, that they didn't, either they were missing something, or they didn't work, or there were questions missing, or they were not logical, or whatever. So our biggest churn actually came as a result of badly programmed surveys, or simply that the survey tools did not work. So I set out in, I don't know, 2018 perhaps, to see if we could build a conversational survey tool. That word did not exist at that time. So that's a post ChatGPT added word. But the meaning of it was, I had a friend of mine that is a doctor at natural language processing. And so I asked him, do you believe that we could build something where the reply from the respondent would in real time be understood by the machine, understanding what is the cusp of that answer, and continue to build on that answer, to drill further down into that particular answer, in order to present the buying customer with a much deeper and richer data set around the subject at hand. And I thought that was a fantastic idea. Of course, I mean, who would not like a richer data set? As it turned out, when we had a workable, it was not even an MVP, but we had something that at least I could show. It turned out that no one was interested, which came as a slight surprise. So in 2020, I told the boys and girls that, despite what I said earlier, that we either have to reinvent ourselves or fold this. And
just a question. I want you to keep going.
yeah,
I imagine at some point there were enough data points of disinterest that crystallized for you. And yet it can be so hard, especially for founders, to like let the baby go. What was it for you that helped you actually open your eyes to the fact that your initial idea was not going anywhere, to help you sort of acknowledge the truth of it?
I haven't really thought about that, but I would guess it was the very clear message that we would break their data series, because they had done the same survey for, I don't know, 25 years. So if we came up with a totally different model, that would actually break their data series. And
Right.
that is not all the surveys that people do, of course. So it's just a part of it. But it's typically one of the largest they do, if it's for brand awareness or whatever it can be. So I guess if we had focused more on the qualitative part of surveys, we probably could have sold it as a way of doing qual studies, but in a quantitative way. And I was not smart enough to present it in that fashion.
So you have this moment, you say to the team, either we reinvent or we're done. And what happens next?
Well, then luck strikes. Typically. Then God intervenes and sends you to a meeting with a mass recruitment firm. And they tell you that they spend an enormous amount of resources doing interviews. And despite them doing all this, they are still leaving at least 30 to 40% of applicants on the table. And they mistreat pretty much everyone, because they simply do not have the resources to deal with the inflow of applicants, even though they tried their best. And then a few months later, luck strikes again. One of your friends, who just happens to have another friend that is also at a mass recruitment firm, gets pretty much exactly the same answer. And then you start talking. And then you go back to the doctor of NLP and ask him if you believe that we could redo this, so we actually start doing structured employee interviews. And he says, yeah, of course. And then we remade it into version 1.0, which was not very good because we had not enough data. But a couple of years later, when we had a couple of psychologists rating interviews and understanding exactly how we should structure it, we started to have something that actually did work. So then we started commercialize it in the fall of 2022, like 2 years later. It took us like 2 years to just get enough data. Because one thing when it comes to, we only do frontline workers. We do not do white collar at all, because that is a very, very red ocean in all aspects of the work. And we also thought that due to AI, the jobs that will be cut first will probably be white collar. It's extremely hard to replace a bus driver, at least for now, especially within a city. It's extremely hard to replace a plumber, if ever. So we kind of figure that without too much analysis, let's do blue collar and frontline workers. That makes more sense. So that's what we did. And the amazing thing is that there is, at least to my knowledge, no one that has ever saved an interview with a frontline worker. There simply is no data. So I would say that today we're probably sitting on the world's largest database of frontline workers' interviews. And typically, there are 14,400 different roles in the frontline space globally.
Wow.
And it employs around 2.73 billion individuals. And it's everything from receptionists to bus drivers to store personnel, retailer personnel, to the plumber, and everything in between.
And so how large is the database now?
I think we have something like 10 million interviews.
10 million interviews.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's I would guess that today we can, with some pride, say that we are very good at predicting the frontline workers' success in the workplace.
Wow. With what kind of predictive success? Give us a percent.
There has been a few customers that have done parallel studies between what Hubert delivers from a quality point of view compared to their own physical teams. And depending on role, because it differs between different roles. Hubert delivers 2 to 5 times better. And if you start thinking about that, that is not that impressive in a way, because if you are hired as an interviewer for a large retailer, you probably do the first 10 interviews before lunch, and you do them somewhat okay. But when you hit your 17th, 18th, 19th interview in the afternoon, you should be kind of tired and starting to think, is this really what I should be doing the rest of my life? It's a very kind of, it's tough work. I mean,
Yeah.
you're representing your employer, so you need to be kind, inquisitive, curious, on top of your toes, and telling the company at the same time as you do the interview.
Yeah.
And I'm in, they have my respect to such a large degree, because what they do is extremely tough. You have to be smart, on your toes, very kind, and at the same time curious and inquisitive. It's a high toll on your mind.
Absolutely. I didn't prep you for this, so feel free to say no. Do you want to give us a quick preview, a quick demo of Hubert?
I actually don't have a demo. In that case, I would have to hook up to an actual position somewhere.
Don't worry about it. Let me switch gears. I want to ask you a couple things. And we talked about the genesis of Hubert. You have this small team. I want to know, especially this not being your first rodeo, not your first startup by any stretch. What are the leadership lessons that you've taken from past company building experiences and brought into building? This is two questions in one. Brought into building Hubert and brought into building J12, the venture firm you co-founded. What have you learned as a leader in the past that you've translated into building these two companies?
I think between those two, I don't think I have changed that much in my leadership style.
Not so much between them, but from before them to them.
Okay. Well, I've always been, and that comes kind of with the how Sweden as a country function, I guess. I truly believe in transparency. So to that end, I've always been very forthcoming with employees as to how the company is actually doing. It probably scares some people, but in that case, they should probably not be employees of our firm anyways. So I don't have a problem with that. The good thing with being transparent is that when the shit hits the fan, which it will, it's just a matter of time. Sooner or later, you will run into a brick wall. And if you have been very open as to how things are going, that will build you or buy you such loyalty, because people will know that if things are going good, we are going to tell them that things are good. Look at these numbers. But on the same measure, we will also tell them that when things are bad and the reason why they are bad. I mean, all the times, at least 7-8 times during the stint at Sint, we could not pay salaries on the correct date. because a few large customers were late with their payments. That's typically that is typically the one great reason as to why you're short on cash. Big, beautiful brands not paying their bills. Which is kind of weird also during 2010 and 2020, because the interest rate that they saved by doing that was like very, very low. In that case, you can actually tell people that, well, the salaries are going to be late, and these are the reasons, and no one will question it, because they know that you're not lying. So I think that is, if I were transparent before, I'm even more transparent now.
And what does that look like week to week? How does that manifest?
Well, we had a discussion last week regarding whether we should do a capital raise or not, and it's the entire firm, all 13 actually participating in whether we should do that or not. And I guess we came to the conclusion that we probably should.
Wow.
Okay. We don't have to, but we probably should.
All right. This is great. And this connects to what you were saying earlier about being a big fan of debate, I think, talking it through with people. How did that conversation go? How did you lead it? What was it clear? I'm throwing a bunch of questions at you. Was it clear? Is this a decision we're making together? Are you consulting them and you, or you and others are making it? How did the conversation actually play out?
I guess that if everyone had been against me, I would have argued for the next week until they would have been with me.
All right. So you were, something in you was like, I really only want to go ahead with this if most or everybody's on board. Yeah. But you were pretty clear on the direction you wanted to go.
Yeah.
All right.
But even though if I could have argued that for a week, I might not have won that anyway. You never know. So it's and I think for a lot of people it's kind of a naive thought that you actually are very, very transparent. But that comes back to I have shares in I have some holdings in a small firm where I think they are like 21 employees, something, 21. And they have allowed one person to create a firm within the firm. So he has built his own kind of power structure in this. I mean, if that happens at John Deere or Nike or Walmart, you can understand that happens. In any big organization, that happens. But in a company which it can easily fit into 2 or 3 sofas, it's amazing. And the only reason why it has happened is that firstly, they recruited the wrong guy. It is a guy. Secondly, the founder allowed him to do this. And the reason why he did allow it was that he always gave the guy the benefit of the doubt. Whereas I've always trusted my gut that if something feels wrong, you can bet you're behind that it is wrong.
This goes back, I think, to the decent versus kind. Giving someone the benefit of the doubt seems kind, but in the long term and for everybody else, it might not actually be the decent thing.
Right. And it's not even the decent thing towards the guy in question.
Right.
Somebody has to.
Some boundaries got to be set.
Yes. And then there is a lesson for him to be learned. So So in that respect, I guess I'm even more become quick to decision based on gut.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear. There are a couple of things here, right? On the one hand, you've built a company that's the opposite of gut feeling. It's deep, data-driven, predictive
I'm
AI.
sorry for interrupting, but that is exactly gut.
Go on.
If you can mimic the human brain in a machine somehow, what you're actually teaching this machine is gut. So
You're
gut
teaching
is
intuition.
actually your entire life's experiences
Yeah.
and knowledge meshed
Tell me,
in one.
yeah, tell me if you agree with this, because there are a couple of things that I'm connecting this to. There's this debate. You know the work of Daniel Kahneman?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's this debate that he had years ago with this guy, Gary Klein. So Daniel Kahneman's like, in short, in many cases, don't trust your gut. And Gary Klein is saying that actually intuition can be very accurate. And so they had a debate and they got together and they reconciled. The way they reconciled it was they said there's certain contexts in which it really makes sense to trust your gut and certain contexts in which it doesn't.
Yep.
The context in which it does make sense to trust your gut are what they, I think, referred to as stable regularities. The context isn't changing that much. You encounter it frequently, so you get enough repetitions to learn, and there's a feedback loop. Hiring is especially frontline workers. You're hiring a lot of people. You're seeing the performance. A pretty good example of that. So I imagine when you say sort of you're replicating the brain, and I'm guessing, but tell me if I'm wrong. In some ways, you're inputting data to train the predictive quality. It's a perfect mimic of those contexts in which it makes sense to trust your gut.
Yep.
Similarly, over hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of interpersonal interactions, you're seeing where giving someone the benefit of the doubt makes sense, and where your gut's telling you like, "Ooh, I recognize this, and it's not going in the right direction," and you're also trusting it there.
Right. And I guess the difference perhaps being to some extent that as a person you have, if you feel distrust of me, you probably have a hard time pinpointing exactly what it is in my behavior that creates that notion, right?
Right.
Whereas in a model, you can probably, at least to some extent, pinpoint what it was. I don't know if you're familiar with the firm Hired You in the US. They started out doing video interviews, and they put into the model a lot of metadata when it came to your facial expressions. Merkur are stating that they are doing the same. I think that is a lot of bullshit, to be honest, because my behavior in front of a camera is extremely hard to put into a machine. Because if I have a twitch in my right eye due to a nervous condition or whatever, does that have to be with me being nervous, or does it have to be with me having some sort of cellular-based thing going on? I mean, I'm certain that psychologists will tell me that no, it's perfectly doable. Yeah, I don't think so.
You're suspect.
I'm very suspicious of that.
I want to go back to something you told me in our first conversation. You said that you drew a parallel between ice hockey and company building.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, I think what plays out in 40 to 50 seconds on the ice is pretty much what plays out over the course of 10 years in business. Just to elaborate on this notion and this experience.
What I meant by that is that a startup is like you getting the 5 guys or gals on the ice, and you have a very, very obvious objective. You need to get the puck into the other fella's goal, right? But in order to get there, there are a lot of hindrances along the way. And the way you solve that is typically by moving the puck to someone that has been smart enough to be in an area where he's not intimidated by any one of the hindrances that are also on the ice. So I just figured that whatever we do during these 45 seconds on the ice is in an extremely abbreviated time scale, exactly what you do when you build a startup. And you always have to pass the puck to someone or something that is freer than, and I mean that someone in a symbolic sense, because it could be the business model that is freer than competition, or it could be the pricing that is freer than competition due to you having been smarter when it comes to product development or whatever. Or it could be the product in itself that is freer. You need to do the stuff as a team that enables you to actually have free resources or smarter resources or something that creates these free degrees of freedom that allows you to actually close in on the net at the other side. And if you're really bad at that, regardless if you are playing ice hockey or building startups, you will not pass your own defensive blue line. You will get stopped pretty quickly because someone is actually playing your game way better than you are.
I love it. Not just because I love sports metaphors. I'm curious at J12, right? So you invest not just in companies, of course, but you invest in teams who are building these companies.
Yeah, more than anything else. Because
To what extent, or maybe, yeah, how are you evaluating the ability of the team to operate in this manner when you're considering an investment opportunity?
a lot of people would tell you that they would never invest in single founder teams. I don't have that inhibition. I kind of like single founders. They typically have a large chip on the shoulder. They are out there to prove something to someone. I don't care whether it's their mother, their sister, their brother, their father, their competitor in track and field at high school. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But if they do have this extremely large chip on the shoulder, they will typically succeed in whatever they are doing. So I'm more or less always looking for teams that have a fantastic driver. It doesn't have to be a chip on the shoulder, but it helps.
Yeah.
And there needs to be a driver. And typically, I'm not so sure it's enough with just having a fantastic, great idea. Because, I mean, the funny thing with ideas is that on the one side, ideas come cheap, right? You and I can probably come up with 50 fantastic business ideas here and now. Execution is everything, right? But without the grand idea, even the best execution might not suffice, right?
Let me ask you one more question on this, because I'm totally with you that a company is not an idea. An idea does not make a company. So once you've invested with this appreciation for great teamwork, how do you support, whether it's a single founder or a founding team, how do you support them in the effective teamwork they need in order to execute well?
Depends a little bit on the age of the founder, because the demands are different based on age and experience. And these days they tend to be fairly young, partly because AI is youngish technology. So I think it's a lot about, like the one I told you about before, that they have this misconception of allowing people to do whatever because that's the nice thing to do. Leave people alone and they will just go out there and do things. So in those instances, it's very easy to help them out in their kind of leadership development. If you want to use that big fancy word for it. I have the greatest respect for everyone, regardless of age. So it's not for me to tell them how they should do things. It's if we to some extent can help them see the light on their own, that would be the best. If they are older, if you're past 45, perhaps. How old are you, Jack?
38.
38. Okay. I was on the verge of saying if they are older than you at 40, but you're 38, so you're close enough.
Close enough.
Close enough. I think it's if they are first-time entrepreneurs, which actually does happen from time to time. They have been working in this large firm for a very long time, and then they have this fantastic idea, and they know they have the network, they have the relationships, they have whatever it takes to actually build a firm. They typically need a rocket put in their behinds as quickly as possible, because they are not fast. They have an underappreciation of trying to go and decide on gut feeling, then find out that it was wrong, go back, redo, do again, try it out, don't spend time, not on hiring. I mean, I've never understood Google, who spends like zillions of hours just trying to find the correct person instead of just hire them and get rid of them if they don't fit.
Yeah, hire them. Yeah,
and
exactly.
That goes for almost all decision making. I mean, the firm is small. No one will notice all your mistakes. It doesn't matter. You can do any amount of mistakes. No one will ever write about them because you are literally nobody.
Yeah. Nobody gives a shit right now.
Nobody gives a shit.
You got to make enough mistakes to the point where people start giving a shit. But if you don't make mistakes, you're not going to get there.
Right. I think what we try to help people with is just the small things that helps them evolve as leaders, depending on the stage the firm is in, what their own experiences are, and like on the ice hockey ice, that try to make them understand that this thing will not get any better than the worst person in your team. Either you try to make the entire team function as a very high-performing team by helping each and every one. And the most important person for that to happen is actually you as the founder, or as the, I don't know, the center, or whoever, to continue in the ice hockey analogy.
That's it. That's wisdom. Any final thoughts, Bo?
Now, I was on the verge of going political, but I won't do that. It's so easy these days.
So easy, sometimes necessary. All right.